Happy holidays. It's December 14th. Holy cow, that was actually somebody was in a chat room with me in a meeting and going, holy cow, is next week Christmas? And pretty much, yeah, it is. The question is, are you ready? Well, actually kind of close. Was it tomorrow? Geez, tomorrow I am going to start on a trip to go see my family and a tradition which we call everybody's birthday dinner. That is where all of us kids, I'm actually the last of five kids, all drive to my dad's place. But the reward for all of us traveling is that he takes us to a really nice restaurant. This year on deck is a three Michelin restaurant. Did you know there's only about 124 three Michelin restaurants inside the world, right? Talk about rarity, talk about rarity. This person's rare because she owns her own company, used to do local event planning, and now does international, maybe national, out of state programming, and of course works with the one and only Liz Caruso. Let's welcome Jennifer Clark. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
People always tell me, I didn't know it's going to get such an intro into this
I
place.
love it. The enthusiasm. How do you keep it up? That's what I want to know.
Coffee.
It helps.
It helps. Well, I'm here in Seattle. We do have great coffee, so that's the good news.
That's right.
So Jennifer, you own a company called Emerge Events, and of course work with our good friend Liz at Techsytalk. For our friends who don't know you, right? I got to meet you through Techsytalk and a bunch of stuff this year. For our friends who don't know you, who are you and what do you do? And maybe even add how did you get through the pandemic? Because crying out loud, you're a planner, right? And March of 2020 had to probably be one of the most epic moments in your career.
It's quite coincidental that March 4th, 2020, I had an event planning conference here. And I remember the word COVID was mentioned twice, maybe three times in a session. And back then, that was pre-COVID, I only did local events here in Mississippi. That was it. I didn't do anything outside of the state. And that conference, we had a panel that came from New Orleans because I'm really close by to New Orleans. We had the French market coordinator. We had some really Galatoire's event coordinator was there. We had some independent planners on this panel, and it was an amazing panel. And the next week, all of their industries, my industry, all of their businesses were completely shut.
Actually, so my side note to that, Jennifer, was the last program I went to was our MPI Meetings Professional Internationals Cascadia Educational Conference. And we were halfway between wearing a mask and standing apart and using hand sanitizer and hugging each other. And little did we know that, literally, that would be the last time. It was the last time, actually, Joan Eisenstadt, Elizabeth Glau, and myself all had a dinner together.
Wow, that is really sad. It just makes me sad thinking about that. Wow.
Yeah. Michelle Hecken and Nicole Smith, by the way, are on Facebook Live and say good morning.
Hey,
so.
This is great.
Yeah. So that conference happens, and then what did you do?
And that was it. That was my last event, March 4th. And I had a meeting that week as well. And I do an ADHD conference here locally. And I was at the clinic that works for that event that I'm hired by. And I was meeting with the social media manager going over social media. And literally, I was kicked out. They said, you have to leave. And I was like, what? Can we finish our meeting? They're like, no one is allowed in the clinic. And I was like, what does that mean? It was just super surreal, right? I was not allowed. I was getting kicked out of our local clinic because I was not safe. No one's safe these days. And that was it. That was my last in-person face-to-face meeting for quite a long time. But really, my local business, although we couldn't do in person, I had several events that we just, everybody knows the game. We postpone. Do we cancel? Do we keep trying? And I had some events that just kept getting postponed, over and over and over. And everybody was really gracious. I think 2020 was the year of grace. So, figuring out how to do these virtual things, figuring out how to cancel, what do we do? And I feel like the world was just full of grace. Then we don't have as much of that now. People don't have the patience for a lot of the mistakes that we were making back then. So grace is gone. Now everybody's like, it's got to be perfect, But that
But
year,
let me add on to that, right? Because I understand what you mean. One of my very good friends, Tyler Paris, said like 2020 was like junior high, right? And 2022 is like high school, and you got to get ready for grad school and some other stuff coming up. And what I meant by that is like in 2020, everyone was fine. Like you could be on mute, you could have your camera screwed up, right? You could have like your laundry back here. But when it hit 2022, it was like the grace was over, and it was like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
why did the grace actually need to be over? Why can't just people be nice to each other and
Oh
saying,
my
you know what,
gosh.
it's fine, right?
Nope. It's gone. And we're still learning. I mean, now, now we're even further in for a spiral because, we have these amazing platforms that all came up and now we don't know, are they going to stay? What do we do? Um, so it's just this constant. I know every industry was in tumult, but I just feel like our industry was literally just like, it was literally illegal to do our jobs, to have someone in person and gather, and it was illegal. And so thankfully I was in the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
I only did local events, didn't do anything virtual. I remember my very first Zoom meeting was with Liz Caruso in like 2018. And I was so nervous. I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to be on camera. And it was because of her Ignite program. And I remember that first Zoom. Nobody was really doing a lot, or at least here where I am. Back then, everything was just in person. We didn't have to meet virtually. And so through Liz, I already knew Zoom. I already had like some experience in virtual. And I was just in the right place at the right time, and she needed some help, trying to get these events launched virtually. And I just learned all I could, made all the mistakes I could, and just, started working with her. I think Techsytalk, I guess we did it in 2020. Yeah, that was probably the first time I worked with her, in 2020. And then after that, we started doing other virtual events through 2021. And then we just had, Techsytalk Global this past November again. And the feel is different every year. Last year, everybody was still really engaged in virtual, everybody's still learning, trying to figure out. This year, everybody's trying to figure out both. You've got to do both. You've got to do in person, you have to do virtual at the same time. And that is multiple skill sets together. So I feel like we still are learning, and all event planners out there, I think the biggest thing we can do for each other is to come together. I don't see competition anymore as being such a priority. I think, especially independent event planners, this is not possible to do alone. The events that Liz and I do, like sometimes, she handles the virtual side or I handle the in-person side. You cannot do them at the same time as one person.
And why is that for you, right? I mean, I'm sure some of us have actually tried it. I just want to hear from you. How did you come to that conclusion? Because that's a big conclusion, really, too.
Yeah.
We say it too, which is like never Zoom alone is really one of our core beliefs. But I want to know how you got there.
Hard. Well, and that's another thing. Like Liz is an amazing collaborator, and one of our other colleagues, Sheila Fox, she just became this Zoom expert. I know expert's a hard word to use, but if we had a question, we'd call Sheila, we'd get her in an event, we would do it with her, because like if you have a number of people coming in on a Zoom, there's a lot to deal with, or any kind of platform, whatever the platform is, so say Techsytalk, for example, I'm handling throwing the speakers up and down, trying to take care of that. Liz is handling this and somebody else is handling that. You have to be completely zoned in on your task, whatever your task is. Otherwise, I don't see how it's possible to do it alone. I've tried to do some things alone now, and when you're combining in person and virtual, or just virtual by itself, it is nearly impossible because somebody's going to get left out, whether it's your attendees, your speakers, something's going to get wrong, and it may go wrong anyway. But
That's exactly it, Jennifer. Is like there's these aspects now where you have to think about them. I appreciate that being zoned in, which is you got to be completely present. That's what I tell people is like, you want to be engaged, produce a virtual meeting because you got to be there. And if you're not
yeah,
there, something happens, right? Something, and then you go, it's on me, right? Not muted, right? Person came in, the mic's not ready. You put them on stage, something happens. There's like 100 things that can really happen with that. And I really agree with that. For our guests who don't know, can you describe what Techsy Talk is?
So Techsytalk, actually years ago, I mean, 10 plus years ago, Liz actually retired the event Techsytalk before COVID, retired it because she said, well, I've talked about all the event technology. That's about it, retired it, brought it back from retirement during COVID because,
Like the
COVID.
Phoenix.
And so Techsytalk is a entity that Liz created that kind of specializes in events and technology. How do you utilize technology in your event? Pre-COVID was a little bit different than now. Now it's, every aspect of your event has to have a digital component, whether it's registration, whether it's, in-person things, virtual things, and even in life, if you listen to, and you can find all the recordings, but Liz always has a little session about my favorite things. And this year it was a lot of just life things or like work things, not necessarily specific to event planners, but things that anybody can use to keep their work, done better and, better for using technology. So, and that was something I never really used a lot of pre-COVID, was a lot of technology. I was still very, paper-based, still kind of using the Google Forms and that kind of stuff. But I've learned a lot. I feel like I've gotten a degree. Like I wish I could claim all of this knowledge and get some sort of credentials, but that's what she specialized in. And she was in the right place at the right time because she already had her hand in and knew about this. Like you, I'm sure you probably already knew a lot of this and you were just poised, to kind of make the leap. And I was clueless, but I have an ability to learn fast and just make mistakes.
Yeah, Jennifer, if you know my story, I've been meeting online for over 35 years. And the funny part was that we were kicking and dragging people in. We were like, you can do this. And they're like, nah, you gotta
Yep.
fly to Orlando, right? And so I was ready because we had done all these experiments and other things and like knew kind of what was working. Michelle Hecken is already here. She's says, I ran a remote hybrid business for 25 years. So this was actually quote unquote normal for me. And so that aspect is a key part of like learning. So what I want to share with that, I just talked to a CPA friend, and in a CPA before it used to be accounting and like ledgers and things like that, and right now in the CPA field, he says you really need to have a degree in technology if you want to be there, like either AI or spreadsheets or pivot
Mhm.
tables or like you need to know all these things if you want to help the people. And I think meeting planning has come the exact same way, which is what you didn't know is that you basically need a degree in computer science,
Yeah.
right? To be a great meeting professional now. And people had to learn that over 2 years. And it really did accelerate that because you could have stayed paper based for quite a while,
Yeah.
but now you like again there was actually no choice because again our industry was basically illegal. Now that you're kind of on the other side of this, like what did you think about before in technology and now what do you think about technology in the meeting space?
Well, I have to say, there's a lot of silver linings of COVID. I know it was tragic for a lot of people because of the loss of life and
Mhm.
business and all that kind of thing, but it sped things up greatly. We didn't have a choice, had no choice. But had this have happened, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's no way because a lot of the technology was just complicated. Now, it's user friendly for the most part. It's still a lot of bells and whistles and everybody, if you're a virtual event planner, you have to be a production person. And that is, I remember thinking, I watch news, especially news, because, they pop up things all the time. I watch it differently now. I'm like, somebody's controlling that. I never thought about it before. Like your setup is amazing to me. And I don't aim for that. I'm okay with like contracting out if I need like heavy duty in a production. But now I have a way greater appreciation for production because it is hard, but there's so many technology pieces that make it easy. Zoom, if you learn enough about Zoom or StreamYard, or like you were saying, Restream, you can do it fairly easily. But I think what you're doing here with like doing these interviews, and Liz does a lot of, interviews and things like that, you get to practice a lot when it's lower stakes. So if someone really wanted to get into just trying virtual events, have an event for 10 people and just try it, because once you get hundreds of people in a platform, then that's not the time to be experimenting. And a lot of the times there's no dry run for these things. It's like, here's event day. We hope our speakers are, I'm a big speaker run through kind of girl, especially in 2020, 2021. But even now, if I make the mistake, I've made the mistake like several times where I'm like, they should know what they're doing. They are good. They've got it. And then you've got someone coming off an airplane in an airport. I'm like, oh my gosh, So you got to make sure, your speakers know what they're doing virtually, even if you think they do, because then you have them like just not being able to get their slides up or this or that. And it's simple to have a run through. And so I'm really a big preparing kind of girl. Like I want to have everything, a run through that kind of stuff. But a lot of the events, you can't just have a run through of the whole thing. You just, it's like a dry run right when you do it. Hope it works.
I know that's the challenging part. What happens here, and you, of course, Jennifer has seen my setup. Like we can do things like this, and which is what television stations do. And this stuff used to cost like over $100,000
Yeah.
even in the entry point. But you were just talking about like Grace, right? Our version of Grace is what we call the no sorry zone. So this is we developed this in April of 2020, and just told people this was our version of Grace. By the way, is the no sorry zone, and we still have it to this day. Which is we just tell people you don't need to apologize in this meeting unless you really hurt somebody's feelings, right? So you're fine. Let's get on with it. And uh, and people appreciated that mainly because it brought that stress. Remember the anxiety level of like meeting in March of 2020? It was like this high, and it's not just because of the tech. It was like everything else, right?
Yes.
News was changing every day, situation changing every day. You might be out of a job, blah blah.
Yeah.
And all this no sorry zone, all it did was try and bring the anxiety down, at least for like the hour we're gonna meet. And
Yeah.
so that people could function again. And so that was really useful with that. And right, so this is the setup that we have here is like the power of a production of a television studio. Now it's possible. And things that I'm doing now, you're right, were not possible 4 or 5, 6 years ago. Or if they were possible, it was really people who were at the cutting edge and like hacking on some stuff. But now I have the ability to do this, which is I'm just going to push a button, right? And now I've changed the scene. I've changed maybe some lighting. I could change some other stuff. And produce a show that looks like this in our house. That's what Liz is doing with like Techsytalk and her interviews. They have an intro video, they have slides, like all these things that are things that you're right, that television studios did that now we do. And right now, this interview too, Jennifer, is streaming to over 20 locations, right? I couldn't do that in the past. You remember, I don't know if you know, Kiki Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Kiki was doing this for years, by the way. I was always jealous of Kiki. This is a big shout out to you, Kiki. And hello, Olivia, who's also chatting on Facebook Live, is that Kiki would do this thing and she goes, we're getting the streams to go to all the places and do all the things, right? And she showed me what she was doing, and I still stalled for like 2 or 3 years. It took me the pandemic to start live streaming in the style that she was, and I just appreciate some of these people who are leading for years, like showing us the way. Like I even called her one time about some question, like I don't know what this thing is doing. She goes, "Oh, just do this," and then it felt like she was like that person on Saturday Night Live who's like, "Move, right? You just hit Control Alt F4, and then it's gonna work, right?" And so yeah, so like people in the industry were so kind with that. Who are some of the other people in the industry that you felt like you've kind of leaned on in the last 2 years?
Well, what's really, as this event planner from Mississippi, in all these networks and all these just touch points of event planners over the last few years, I'm typically the only one that's from Mississippi, really. Because most of us are focusing on, a lot of local events and things like that. And we're not like big destinations where people are going to, fly in. We do have by the way, if you do want to meet in Mississippi, let me know, because we have amazing places to meet and really interesting things here. However, a lot of us are, just focusing on in person and things like that. So I didn't get a chance to like interact with, you're talking about Kiki. I remember one of the very first Techsytalk globals I was involved in. She was a speaker, and it's not like I don't know her well, but I got to interact for 2 seconds, getting her up on screen or listening to her content. The thing about where I've been the last 3 years, I've been behind the scenes on Techsytalk, gotten to hear her, I've gotten to hear Dahlia, I've gotten to hear all these people, just being in the same room with Liz virtually or in person is an education in itself. So I get to be behind the scenes and listen to all these people. Although when you're producing, sometimes I have to go back. I had to re-listen to all Techsytalk Global because I wasn't really like zoning in. But Phil Mershon, all these people, I get to hear. And then we do events for Liz and I do events for Mike McAllowitz, who brings in also more amazing speakers. And so in person, 2 times this year, I've gotten to be in person and listening to people like Chris Ducker and amazing speakers, because I'm just in the right place at the right time. And I'm just amazingly lucky to be able to produce events like that, where I get to listen to these amazing people and learn from them while I get to produce the events. It's really neat, really neat.
Yeah, this is one of the slides that I have up, which is these are some of the people I got to work with over the last 2 years. And I've always felt like sometimes in MPI, right? Like I'm the small planner, or I do team building. And what I've learned over the 25 years that I've been in business, that team building is 1% of an event budget, which is like, I was like in the wrong business in some ways, but I loved it. So I just did it. Right. And it worked. But now as a producer, sometimes you're in charge of 100% of the budget, or at least the production side of the budget. But this is like Jay Bottasinga, Walking Dead. This is Patrick Lencioni, one of my favorites now. I'm a huge Elizabeth Gilbert fan, right? I never
Yeah.
got to meet. I got to meet her personally on Zoom, and that's the magic of Liz, is that she can endear you in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That you go her authenticity, vulnerability is like off the chart, and that's something that she learned. I don't even know if she knows this. She learned how to transmit that virtually, because she could always do that in person. I was what I think,
Yeah.
but she also figured out how to do it. And of course, Damon John here, as part of FUBU. I have a really good friend in Mississippi I want you to meet, because she produced, well, she works for a nonprofit, and this is Kendall Cox, lives in Mississippi, and she works for a nonprofit that helps create clean water in other third world countries. And she produced their own retreat in multiple languages. And I heard that Michelle's on here and that she works with a translation or interpretation company. And it was translated into Spanish, French, and Haitian Creole
That is amazing.
simultaneously here on Zoom. And she took the model from me, because she heard me talk. Like, I run a 6 language interpretation meeting, and she learned how to do it herself, and like bought the interpreters and brought them into her meeting, and she basically made one of her meetings feel like the UN. And what they said was that it was so inclusive, it was so engaging, because one, it was real time, and two, it was in their language. And the
Yeah.
interpreters were really good, right? Interpreters have to keep up with us people who like to talk fast and keep run-on sentences and things
Yeah.
like this.
Interpretation, I've learned over the last couple of years, is unbelievable. It is. And whether it's the American Sign Language, languages, I don't know how they do it. I cannot understand it. We don't slow down for them. I don't.
That's the reality. Yeah, we're trying that. We say it's a best practice. We have such a hard time. Although I got to admit, we just had a program, and one of the speakers who's been back 4 or 5 times finally demonstrated slowing down, and the interpreters were like, they were like cheering in the interpretation Zoom windows.
Yeah, that's amazing. It was my first time working with interpretation this year. We had American Sign Language, and then we had languages and things like that. That's another thing event planners have to worry about. You've got not only, it used to be meals and that kind of thing, in person, but now you have to be, if you're working with a global audience, everything changes. You've got time zone. That's another thing. The time zone thing. I'm never in the same time zone of people I'm working with, ever, rarely. And so I'm always like trying to translate all the time zones in my head. If you're putting a meeting together, it's the middle of the night, for somebody else, you got to consider that. So it's, so much now that it's a global environment, you can
Yes.
work anywhere virtually.
I do. I teach a class to Saudi Arabia, and it requires me to stay up from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., which is their 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., right? And so, and it's possible. The other invisible thing is not just the language, though, is like the culture too. Again, that was what I was most afraid about in the Saudi Arabian class, is that it's a culture I don't know a lot about. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I've actually really gotten to know a lot, as well as I was pleased that they were happy with, my style is experiential. So I don't talk for 4 hours. No way, right? I make people do stuff and they come back all the time. What's the number one thing you love about this class? Oh, more challenges, more initiatives. Let's do that, right? Because even if they are challenged by the language, they are never, they like being challenged with a puzzle or some kind of experiential type thing. So this is a great question for you, especially as an event planner, as the owner of an event planning company, and of course now on the digital side. What has to happen for you in a virtual meeting for it to be engaging for you, Jennifer Clark?
Well, I've learned a lot about myself over the past couple of years, and I am not as much a visual learner as I am just content. I just rely on the content. Sometimes visual, like my kids like comic books. I cannot hardly look at a comic book because it's just like, whoa, way too
Oh, it's
much.
a lot. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
So I love content, and what I've learned from just this is not every event whatsoever, but like Techsytalk Global, for instance, that's actually a combination of like some experiential things. Like, let's show you how this works, and let's, Liz always says, "Let me fail at it, so you don't have to fail at it." So we try stuff, and all the different things. Like she was using twine, probably one of the very first users back when it was just twine. And then she did the twine with Zoom, this last one. How it has evolved. Gosh, just thinking of that so quickly. But so she combines experiential, but also content. Like she doesn't use a lot of PowerPoint. Like she doesn't use a lot of slides and things like that when she speaks. But when Liz speaks, people listen because it's the content. You're going to leave with an actual actionable thing you can take away, and it's simple. Her list of favorite things, you might get a couple of things you're going to use immediately. And I also learned that I coordinate a conference here locally for a clinic, and it's an ADHD conference, and it's really content driven because they're leaving with credits. And when you're talking about credits,
Oh, yeah.
you've got to be able to apply for the credentials.
Yes.
They look at the content, and then the people have to take away something. And year after year, they say, we need actionable, takeaways that we can actually implement immediately. Theory's great, but takeaways are the content I'm looking for when I go to events, because I do like to hear stories also, though. Stories are just sometimes get you behind the scenes of something, but I don't need a lot of fancy stuff unless it's this fancy stuff I might can use later, like looking at your stuff. I'm like, how can I use that? But I'm always thinking about how I can use it later. But content that people can actually use immediately is helpful because we're so bombarded by things. It's a lot out there. So that's what I look for when I go to an event, and kind of what I have to think about when I'm producing is what are we going to, what's the takeaway, and I finally figured out what my name means. Emerge events. I just, when you form a business, you don't have a clue what you're doing. Some people do. I didn't know what I was doing. I was an psychology major. I did not major in business.
Yeah.
And I made this business with the name Emerge Events. I agonized. I read all the books about naming businesses. And now I feel I work on events where someone's going to emerge in a different way. And so I think about that. How is someone going to emerge? How's your sponsor going to emerge? How is the attendee going to emerge at the end of this event? So it's kind of like begin with the end in mind. So that's what I think about when thinking of, why do I attend and why do I want people to attend?
Transformational meeting planning. I mean, when you have the right speakers with the right content, they inspire you, right? Sometimes without trying to go too much on the motivational side. And more importantly, like that actionable item, if I take something away from a conference and actually do it, like I put it into practice, that's value to me because and then there's lots of things that you're seeing here that I've seen other people do and figured out. I mean, it's why I made this massive green screen, right? There's this massive green screen behind me. People like Jim Carroll, he painted his entire basement green and started doing these keynotes in three-dimensional spaces, right? Like this. And I'm going, one day I finally go, what first you say it's out of my reach, and then you go, I can do this, right?
Yeah.
You know what? If he could do it, I could do it. And I think those are all great pieces that come along with it. I love that you work with ADHD groups. And what I said to Joan, actually, I remember, and actually I used my sponsorship time at that Cascadia Education Conference to not sell my business. I stood up there for 5 minutes and I said, hey, look, this thing is coming down the pike. We don't know what it is. All I can tell you that I know for certainty is one thing. This is going to affect, as a meeting planner, this will affect your mental health for however
Mhm.
long this thing lasts. So I just want all of you, as my friends and colleagues and clients, to like make sure you listen to this note and watch your mental health over the next couple of years. So I would love to hear from you. What did you do for your mental health as a meeting professional that you think helped you get you through? And it got you through because I know you're here. You're here with me now. So
And it's a constant struggle because I think connection is one. I think you need to connect with people in your industry. So you need that lateral connection, people that are doing the same thing you're doing. Venting, just venting. Like if you get a bunch of event planners together, especially I remember getting together, I think it was one of Liz's casual get-togethers where we talked about the horror stories of virtual. That's hilarious, to vent about the person that came on doing this or whatever, you know? So just to vent with people that are doing what you're doing. So that's one thing. And then you got your whole personal life. Like I started a kind of an online club for moms because I'm a mom, and that's a whole different ball game because not only, I mean, I work at home. My kids are always seeing my work. They see the stress, all the time. So I need to connect with other mothers, and then also whatever else you got, so if you're a caregiver for somebody, you need to find a group of those people. I think the connection to people who are doing what you're doing is key. So connect. And I think collaborate is huge. You can't, I've done almost everything on my own. I'm a solopreneur. I try to do events by myself. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad for my mental health. Yes, I've done it. And I've gone to a few local meetings lately and I'm like, I can't do it by myself anymore. And so I'm gathering people now, and it doesn't have to be an employee. You don't have, I always thought, oh, I've got to have staff. No, I can partner with other people. So that's what I learned through Liz too, because I don't work full time with Liz, but I do contract work and I love working with her. And then I can do my own thing. I cannot do it alone, nor should you, because like today, it's really nice right now, surprisingly. We're supposed to have tornadic weather here in a minute. And if I had a virtual event with Liz, for instance, she was not going to have tornadoes. So if I go down, she's still up. And
yes.
I was with her in New Jersey for an event. Her kid got the flu. So she couldn't be there, one of the days. And she took the virtual side, which was great because it's probably better to not have her on site so that she could focus on virtual only. And I took care of the in-person. So collaboration and connection, huge. Someone has to know where this is my bad thing. I've not figured this out yet, but I'm going to. I can have a whole meeting put together and I'm the only one that knows for adult, how to do it, right?
Yeah.
What if I get sick? COVID opened my eyes. If I got COVID, no one would know what I'm doing. And there's no one that could do it. So I've got to figure that out and have, with Google or whatever, some sort of, platform where someone could just go in, see where I am, see what needs to be done. If something happens to me, it's not smart to not work that way. So connection and collaboration keeps me sane. Also, I started therapy, which needs to be not stigmatized anymore. I think everybody needs a therapist. It helps with everything. It helps my business. It helps me personally, helps me as a mother, a wife. And I started online therapy, which I love because I just love talking on the phone to her. And she's amazing. That's a lie. And it is life-changing. So that's helpful. And sometimes insurance covers teletherapy, guys. So look into it. And that's been super helpful. So to connect with someone who can it's like I talk to her and she puts it back to me and shows me what I'm talking about. And then I'm like, oh, lights dawning here, So we are not meant to do all of this by ourselves, none of it. You have to have people you can vent to, people you can work with, and then professionals who can help you with your mental health.
Yeah, every coach needs a coach. I love that you shared openly too that you're in therapy like it used to be, or even right now I can feel the stigma with like I'm in therapy, and it's like I go back to like these movie quotes and other things
Laying
like
on the
that.
couch.
Right, like Parenthood is like, well, if she's so smart, why am I in therapy, right? But just like what you said before, in that venting piece, that alone is sometimes the value of just like for an hour or 50 minutes or whatever, you get to dump on somebody else as opposed to when you're an owner, everyone's dumping on you. Like you need to do this and you need to do that. And you get it from all angles. As a mom, you'll start getting it at multiple angles. I was a single dad with 3 kids and
Oh,
you got to deal with all these things. And sometimes they all seem to collide all at once, right?
yeah.
Which is like you're in the middle of a meeting, your kid gets sick, right? They call you from school, you got to go pick them up, and all these things happen. And one of the things that's really been valuable for me too, and I just taught another class of virtual producers, and I said, here's the part that nobody tells you about. You need to learn how to stay calm when your natural reaction is to not be calm.
Yes.
And there's lots of different ways that it said, in some ways I can't really teach you this. I want to talk to you about it. I just need you to know to find your own way. Because when you're on camera or you're at least live and on stage and something goes wrong, you're going to have to navigate that. And, Jan Keck, one of my really good friends too, he's now in Germany, once had a meltdown in a class. He plugged in a new USB device before the class, and what it did is gave intermittent power to everything else. So things started randomly failing. Worse, even like it's better almost to have like a full-on failure because it's communicating to you saying I'm not good, but like something would work and then it would stop, and it work would stop, and I love sharing this story because his all the students in the class, the attendees in the class said, we learned more from you watching your tech meltdown than we ever would have learned anything else
Wow.
in this class. Because he did. He remained calm. He explained what was going on, right? He was real and authentic without, being apologetic. And so there were all these really crafty factors. And there is nothing in the world, I feel like, that would train you for that until it happens to you,
Yeah, you can't expect it for sure. You
right?
can't.
But
Yeah.
but the one thing you can work on is your demeanor, which is like
Yeah.
when your client is, asking for crazy stuff and what you really want to do is X, but you just need to calmly come back with Y and going, well, we could do that, and let me tell you the consequences. Right? That's what should come out of your mouth at some point like that.
I think
But
that's a hard skill set. And I think some people just don't have that. And it's hard to learn. I'm very happy that I'm able, I don't do it very well at home. Like with my kids and my husband, they get the worst of me. But at an event, with a client, I'm like, crazy stuff's going on. And I'm like, I give the client what they need at that time. They don't need to know all the crazy stuff that if they're asking for something crazy, they don't need me to vent to them and say, that's insane. I'm just like, we'll figure it out. They need us to be the voice of reason. And well, no, the voice of reason to them. And then we turn around and we go like, oh my gosh, you can do that behind the scenes, but let the client know it's gonna be fine.
yes,
You got it.
we'll work one. I always tell them one solve one problem at a time. I've heard both sides on the family side. Of hopefully, one of these will help you. One is like, right. I finally had to take the stance because we say all the time, oh, I got a client, right? I'll move stuff around for a client, and in the end, I finally figured out. It took me. This is my parenthood journey. Is that the kids are most important clients, right? Your
Yeah.
family is the most important client. And so I now work on that side, and then the other side I tell sometimes too. I've told my kids. I said, I'm showing you this because I'm being vulnerable and authentic as I am. And I say these things to you because this is what's really going on in my head. And I don't want to filter what's going on with you, right? Because you're close to me. I just want you to know how I really feel.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that works. And at least they know they're like going, well, he really feels that way, right? He wouldn't, otherwise they would just think like I was mad all the time. I'm like, I'm not really mad, but I'm like, this is whatever happened. That's the way I feel. Anyway, so I hope one of those helps you.
That is helpful.
My kids are all out now, so I'm excited. They, one bought a house and got married during the
Ah,
pandemic, and they're living their life. I appreciate that. I think there's so many good things. Speaking of kids in the future, right? Now that you've been through these last couple of years, where do you think the virtual space is going? What do you predict is going to happen in the virtual space from your seat?
well, from the events I'm doing, especially the in-person ones here, it's here. Virtual is here forever. Obviously, it's never going to go away, and it's always going to be an important part. For example, the ADHD conference that I do always was in person. There was not one piece of it virtual years ago, and it's a 19-year-old conference. 2020, was virtual. 2021 was virtual. 2022 was our first hybrid. Learned a lot about that, but I think it has to have a virtual component forever because it's an educator. A lot of educators come, a lot of your professionals that deal with children with things like ADHD and autism and things like that. A lot of those professionals, a lot of those teachers cannot, have a presence in person just because, it's not easy to get a substitute these days, especially for a multi-day conference. Also, some of them just cannot get away, and they cannot get away to watch it, at the same time it's going on. So they need to have the flexibility to watch it, get the content, get the credits at a later date. And so figuring that out is hard because, when you're dealing with credits, it's very complicated. But I think this year we learned that people so appreciated the ability to go virtual if they needed to, and to go in person or do both. A lot of them did both and they just got all these, credits. It was great. And they really appreciate it. And, it used to be you had 4 choices of this session at this time and you could see one. Well, now through the power of virtual, you go to one and then the next day or the next week, you can watch the others if you choose. So I think the value is forever here. It is just hard figuring out how to manage both if you're not used to it. And this is my first time doing both, hybrid or whatever people want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do it simultaneously because I thought it would be harder. May have been harder not doing it simultaneously. I'll have to figure that out. But I learned a lot about, doing both. And I know I cannot be there for both at the same time because it's a lot of things that you don't know, so I've learned a lot about that. But I think the future it's digital. But people love in person. So you have to figure out, again, what's the end result? Why are people coming to this? And then, if it's just like serendipitous connection, that's a little harder to, you can do it through digital, definitely. We've done it, but there's nothing that's going to take away from in person. People still like to travel. It's harder. It's more expensive for the individual, but people still want to be in person. So there has to be that, obviously. And then there has to be a digital component, not for every event, but for events that people can't come. People can't always travel. People can't always take off work.
Yep.
People can't always take the time right then to do it. So I think that the future is digital. And then watching my kids learn, pre-COVID, they did some technology. But now, you lose a day of school, they could do it virtually. It's not that big of a deal. They all know how to do it.
I know the kids are sad. There's no more snow day, right? I heard snow days have gotten banned in some cities because they're like, go virtual on snow day. And the kids are like, no.
Then you hope for power outages and then they're good.
Oh, yeah. Internet power outages. Yeah. There's, I want to just give this reference too. Do you know Bobby Carlton with the website Innovation Women?
Mm-mm.
I want you to go there. And here's the reason why. She said, and gave me some great stats where, one is there's not enough women speakers. And then she shared the reality. Quite often, there are not enough women speakers because they're taking care of the home or the kid, or that's what they need to be in the city, or they're taking care of other stuff, or they're a business owner. And there was just all these reasons why they were not showing up in this important spot, which is on the stage, speaking to other people. And she created a website, innovationwomen.com. And I got to tell you, they also provide a list of places looking for speakers. And I've been applying to them. I've been really, I've got probably 3 or 4 out of maybe 30 or 40. So I'm starting to get some replies on them. I have a whole bunch on the hopper. But I think what's most important, what that she told me, is that virtual allowed women to keynote much easier. Because, it is a privilege to be able to travel. That 1 hour keynote is 3 days out of house. 3 days out of house can mean all sorts of stuff, right? And she said, it's so much easier, right? You click a button, show up, right? You're on for an hour, you go back, and now you can take care of stuff. And it has allowed that. She really wants to see the split of speakers on stage, move closer to that 50-50 spot. And it is currently not that way. But virtual is one of the enablement tools, I believe, that can. And then, allies like myself and others are just saying, and now let's just help women look amazing on stage, give productions and presentations. I don't know if you know too, Anna Liata. Do you know Anna?
That name sounds familiar.
She was a past president for not only the National Speakers Association here in Seattle, but the international
Oh, yeah.
National Speakers Association. Seattle's actually had two presidents, and it was really one of them. And I saw her just, her and I had a client who was interested in, she specializes in generational programs. So if you got three or four generations in your workplace, she
Mhm.
helps with that. And she came around and started presenting and like I haven't seen her for like the last 2 years present, and it was super crafty. She was able to put a whole slide on screen, put herself back in the corner while talking on this slide, and then do something I don't normally do, which is she's got her iPad with the pen. She can actually annotate on the slide, but with a pen, so it's natural and in her handwriting style with this client. And I was like, oh, that's what you want to see. You want to see people taking
Yeah.
leadership roles and doing cool things, not only in content, but within the technology in such a way that it helps the attendee. So,
Mhm.
so anyways, check that out. Innovationwomen.com. I've been
Yeah,
really trying
that's
to help
great.
her out. She gave me an account to really check it out, and now I think it's been beneficial to me. I've already gotten 2 or 3 speaking gigs that I would have not had because of that resource, and I think you should too.
That's great. That's great. A lot of people I know have a desire to share their knowledge, and it is hard to just jump in and speak, especially in a digital format. It's a whole different world. But again, in person is even harder, like you mentioned, because then you've got to, redirect your entire life. And a lot of people think it's not possible, you know, when you've got a lot going on at home, whether it's your generation you're raising or your generation you're taking care of above you, whatever it is. Um, we have a lot of barriers.
Yep. So emerge, right? Emerge from those barriers. Where can people find you, Jennifer? If they meet you more, where would they find you at?
This is going to be a really good incentive for me to get my website updated. Emerge Events is where I've always just hosted everything, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, website, it's allemergeevents.com or whatever it is you want to look me up on. And I'm using December as what am I doing next? I know I'm going to continue working with Liz because I love working with Liz. Some of my events I'm going to continue to do, but what's next? I'm trying to figure that out. I know I want to work more with connecting moms together, because one of my theories is that we all go to school, or some people go to school for different trainings for this and that, but who's helping us with motherhood? Nobody. So I think moms need to connect and be there for each other and focus on ourselves, a lot more. So I'm working on that piece, and just being a business owner in the event world is something I want to focus on more too, because it's hard, very hard. But I think all these connections that I've made over the last couple of years through Liz has been very life-changing and literally life-saving. I would not have survived COVID in the way I did had it not been for those connections that I had and just continued to maintain. So wouldn't be right here without that. So very appreciative.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yeah, my key team building belief is build relationships long before you need them. And in this case, sometimes the relationship is with technology. So that was a relationship I built a long time ago, finally paid off. And technology is one of your new teammates. You got to learn how to trust it too, because you don't know how it works until we make the until you blow it on stage or until you
Make a
make a great
mistake.
mistake. Yeah, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and hang out with you a little longer. Go make sure and find Jennifer either if you're in Mississippi or if you're at emergeevents.com. Thanks again, Jennifer.
Thank you.
All right, I'm John Chen, and you've been in this interview. Lots of comments. Thank you so much to Michelle, Olivia, and Nicole Smith, and many others who are chatting here on Facebook Live and the other places that we're streaming this. Happy holidays to all of you. For all the moms out there, right? Make sure you take a mental health day sometime during these holidays, and most of all, have a great holiday season. We'll see you next time.
Always start people and keep going.